Fast fashion brands are often the ones dominating the conversation around unethical practices within the fashion industry, and obviously for good reason. But here's the thing. Just because fast fashion brands take most of the heat doesn't mean that any of those higher end or luxury brands are off the hook. So in today's video, we're going to be diving into the world of luxury fashion. We're going to be talking about its ethics, its impact, and of course, all of the little nuances that come with it. And as someone who has worked in the fashion industry my entire career and who has worked alongside many, many luxury fashion brands, I'm also going to be sharing with you my own personal thoughts on whether luxury brands can be deemed sustainable or not. If you want to see more content unpacking the nuances of the fashion industry, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So just to lay the groundwork of this video, I first want to talk about the positioning of brands within the fashion landscape. So I created a fairly simple visual that I'm going to put on the screen here that will help illustrate where some popular brands fall within the fashion industry's different tiers. Now, just keep in mind that this is based on my own perspective. It is based on my experience working in the fashion industry, and it is very simplified just for the sake of clarity. So at the bottom, we have ultra fast fashion like Shein, we have Cider, Boohoo, and these are brands that are producing items at the speed of light. They have taken fast fashion to a whole nother level. I have an entire video about it. If you are interested, I will link it above here. The step above that, we have just standard fast fashion, which is obviously still very fast and just as destructive as ultra fast fashion, but I separated the two because the fast fashion category is definitely not producing as many items as ultra fast fashion. There's nuance, there's layers to this, but again, this is just my own perspective. And then we have what I like to call mid-level luxury. It's not super high-end items, but it's definitely more than, what you would be spending if you were shopping fast fashion. So we have brands like Cezanne, Rag & Bone, or Sandro. So these are brands that are definitely above fast fashion. They are making luxury a little bit more accessible. They definitely have filled this gap in the market that we didn't see as much a few decades ago, but they're not as pricey or exclusive as other brands that you see at this top tier here, which are brands like Gucci, Chloe, Valentino. We all know those brands, very expensive, very high end, and that is what I'm calling prestige luxury. So just for the sake of clarity, moving forward, whenever I talk about luxury brands, I am referring to those two top tiers. So I think that when you look at these brands and you're able to distinguish why they fall into these certain levels, it's pretty easy to assume that mid-level luxury brands and prestige brands with their high prices and their exclusivity are deemed more ethical. Obviously, they're not churning out 1.3 million new styles like Shein every year. Yes, that is styles, that is not products that they're producing. That is just the individual style. But it is definitely safe to say that in recent years, luxury brands have embraced more high margin mass production in order to meet consumer demands. And with that shift comes greater opportunity for exploitation, which is an issue that spans across the entire industry. When brands have higher prices and they claim to have more bespoke manufacturing, that often creates this perception of ethical superiority, but that is definitely far from reality. While there are luxury brands out there who are genuinely committed to upholding sustainable and ethical practices within their companies, the majority rely on their exclusive brand image to obscure a lack of transparency and these lightly substantiated sustainability claims. Katerina Occhio, who is a sustainability advisor, summarized this perfectly in a Business of Fashion article about the myth of ethical luxury. She says, "I still believe the sector has the power to set a positive example for the fashion industry, but by doing so requires true leadership and a deep commitment to ethical conduct throughout the value chain. It necessitates setting high benchmarks for ethical conduct and sustainability and living up to them. not just marketing them. Ultimately, sustainability isn't just a fast fashion issue. It's not just a luxury fashion issue. It is a global fashion industry issue. And with that, there are a couple different angles I want to talk about when it comes to luxury fashion and sustainability. And the first thing I want to dive into is quality. I like to associate quality with sustainability because it directly impacts how much use we actually get out of our clothes and the actual longevity of them within our closets, because as we know, the best way to be a sustainable consumer is to use and wear what you already have. But here's the thing about luxury brands and quality. Just because you buy something that is expensive or that is from a luxury brand or whatever the case may be, doesn't mean that it is automatically well-made and durable. In 2022, the environmental charity Hubbub and the University of Leeds came together to conduct a study on the link between price and durability. So they tested items of different price points for things like seam strength, abrasion resistance, fading, stretching, things like that. When it came to the category of jeans, the items that performed the best did fall within that higher price range of $160 to $200. However, some of the jeans that were priced around $120 to $160 performed pretty poorly, while some jeans that were priced from $15 to $30 and $30 to $40 actually did quite well. And the same was pretty similar for t-shirts as well. There were a lot of lower priced items that outperformed more pricier items. And the overall conclusion from this study is that price does not equal quality or longevity, even though many people assume otherwise. While it is true that we can't compare luxury brands one-to-one with fast fashion brands, I think it's pretty safe to say that the quality gap is much smaller than we think. To dig even deeper into this, I actually turned to Reddit to get some firsthand opinions on what brands have significantly declined over the years when it comes to their quality. And I found two brands that I would consider mid-level luxury brands that were definitely highly discussed on certain subreddits. And the first brand that I saw a ton of discussion on was, of course, Sézane. I mentioned it in a previous video, but I also want to mention it here because I think it's really interesting. There was one post that stuck out to me where the person was comparing an older pair of Sézane jeans that they had to a newer pair, and they were just going through all of the differences in quality, from the seams to the color to the fit. And I've also seen a similar sentiment on my own videos when I've mentioned the declining quality of Sézane in the past. I've had quite a few of you guys comment letting me know that your Sézane items haven't held up as well, or you've also noticed the decline in quality. Now, if I had to guess as to why this decline in quality has happened with Sézane, and again, this is just my own opinion, my own inference, I think that the brand grew so quickly that quality control kind of just went out the window. And the other brand that I saw a lot of people online discussing the decline of quality within is Fry, which are obviously known for their boots. And I thought it was really interesting because there was quite a few people saying that, you know, they've had their Fry boots for decades and they're still holding up really well. Like, one person said that their mom has had their Fry boots from high school in the 60s, and that person has theirs from the early 2000s. But in recent years, the quality has definitely declined. They are not the same as they were a while ago. And I think that this really sucks for a lot of people because they probably view Fry as a really well-known brand with high quality boots, especially if people have had them for decades and decades and decades. And then they go to buy their own and they're like, this is not the quality that I was promised. So those are just two examples that I think highlight a much bigger issue within the fashion industry, which is the correlation between growth and quality and consumer expectations in quality. And if you want more information on why clothing quality has declined so much over the years, make sure to check out this video above here. I did a complete deep dive into all the factors leading up to this decline in quality and, you know, why it's actually happening. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out. The bottom line when it comes to quality is that just because something is a higher price, just because it comes from a luxury label, doesn't automatically mean that it is going to be of a certain quality. And when we talk about sustainability and quality and what we're actually wearing, like I mentioned, it's so important to use what we have and to extend the life of what we already have. And it can be sometimes difficult and discouraging to do that with really low quality pieces, especially if we expected something more. The next thing I want to talk about is materials, and more specifically, the increased usage of synthetic materials within luxury brands. And when I first started to look into this, when I was looking for articles or videos to help me better understand this more, I really couldn't find much of anything. So I decided to do a little bit of light digging myself. So I went to Net-a-Porter, which, if you don't know, is a very well-known luxury retailer. They carry every single luxury brand that you can think of. And I just typed in polyester in the little search bar. I just wanted to see what was gonna come up. And the results showed 4,000 items. So then I filtered the price from high to low, because of course we're talking about luxury brands, and I was just curious, you know, how expensive things were that apparently have polyester in them. And I pretty much just looked at the first page of items, which was 48 pieces. So obviously a much smaller sample size than 4,000, but your girl does not have time to analyze 4,000 different items. And what I found was very interesting. So out of those 48 items, I found that 37 of them contained over 50% synthetic materials within their fabric composition. And just as a reminder, these are the most expensive items that came up when I searched polyester. They ranged from around $4,900 to $16,000. So I found that to be really interesting. Obviously, I know I intentionally searched for polyester, but I do think it says something when there is a smaller number of synthetic materials in an item versus over 50%. I think that says something. That's just me. Now, I know this wasn't an official research project. I know that I looked at extremely high priced items that, you know, most of us, I'm assuming, would not go out and actively buy. But I do think that it's really interesting when comparing the materials to the price of the item and seeing, you know, what it's actually made out of. Now, polyester and other similar synthetics have a lot of environmental downsides to them. They release microplastics when washed, which end up in our ocean. They are produced with a very energy-intensive process, and they are often derived from petroleum. So I think that these examples just prove that luxury brands also cut corners and they also cut costs by using synthetic materials. So that's my take on the usage of synthetic fabrics in luxury items. Now let's talk about animal products. So I do have some good news, which is that many luxury brands have taken strides towards banning fur. A few examples are Prada, Burberry, Ralph Lauren, and the luxury group Kering, which own Balenciaga and Gucci, have all gone fur-free, which is great. So yes, this is a positive step in the right direction, but it doesn't mean that those brands have stopped using other products like animal skin. So the lack of transparency around animal welfare and minimizing animal suffering is definitely still prevalent. Now, I think that if we were to ban animal materials as a whole, which I do fully support, that we would have to come up with a more sustainable, ethical alternative to it that isn't a synthetic material. Because when I was doing my research, I did find that a lot of brands that were deemed vegan were replacing animal products with things like, you know, polyester, which are obviously pretty awful for the environment as well. Now, I am not at all advocating for us to keep animal products for the sake of not producing polyester. All I'm suggesting is that I think we need to work towards coming up with a more sustainable alternative for these items, which I'm sure there are companies out there doing. You know, when I was looking into this, I was like, well, what are they going to replace it with? And then my brain went down this rabbit hole of like, oh my God, is everything bad? Everything that we have is bad? So with that being said, I still have so much to learn about animal activism and the animal sector of fashion as a whole. And I'm definitely still learning about how animal products and sustainability intersect. So maybe I'll do a future video on it. We will see. Next, I want to talk about manufacturing, specifically when it comes to garment workers. I think that we often associate labels that say made in Italy or made in France or made in the US with a superior quality, especially when it comes to luxury brands. A few months ago, Business of Fashion released a report uncovering that companies like Armani and LVMH, which owns a ton of brands, including Celine, Christian Dior, Fendi, were using illegal sweatshops in Italy. And according to Italian police, these sweatshops were housing workers, and they also removed safety devices from machinery in order to produce items faster. Every single person deserves a safe working environment, and everybody deserves the ability to live securely outside of their job. But despite the gravity of these findings, none of these companies were facing any type of criminal charges. Instead, they were told to address the issue under supervision. I don't even know what that means, but it feels like too light of a punishment, of course. However, there are new EU regulations that are in the works that could definitely give stricter penalties to situations like this, which include up to 5% global revenue. And to put the process of manufacturing or producing the items into a little bit more perspective, LVMH was reported to pay as little as $57 to produce a handbag that would later on retail for $2,600. Now, the profits here are massive, but garment workers are, of course, seeing such a small fraction of that. They're not seeing the $57, of course. They're getting paid a percentage of the $57. In August of 2023, one of my favorite websites in the entire world, Good On You, released a report that showed out of 174 large luxury brands that they analyzed, 111 of them did not pay a livable wage at any stage within their supply chain. And this lack of fair wages is largely stemming from outsourcing manufacturing. Outsourcing helps cut costs, of course, which is why they do it, but it also creates this huge regulation gap between the brand and the manufacturer. So in the early days of my career, I worked for a very, very small luxury brand, and we produced products in Portugal. And I witnessed firsthand how little oversight there was during the manufacturing process. But it's not also just things that are happening internationally outside of the United States. I saw it firsthand in New York's garment district. I witnessed extremely unsafe environments. I witnessed fire hazards with rooms just full of fabric. The place could go up in flames in any second. I saw workers having to wear masks. This was pre-COVID, because the air was just so dirty, the environment was so dirty. And I knew how much the workers were being underpaid because I knew how little we were paying the manufacturers. I just found it really shocking to see these conditions firsthand and really, discouraging. And whenever I talk about stuff like this, I think about that. And I'm like, well, if I saw it in New York's garment district, it's obviously happening elsewhere, and it's probably happening a lot worse elsewhere too. And the more I've learned over the years, the more I've learned that this is truly happening everywhere. It's happening with large luxury brands all the way down to smaller startup luxury brands as well, and everybody in between. Next, I want to talk about the promotion of consumption. The consumption of luxury goods goes way beyond just owning the item. It's about the status that the item represents. And while fast fashion brands are attracting consumers based on trends and low costs, luxury brands do hold a unique power when it comes to this air of exclusivity and prestige. And there's this certain exclusivity that a lot of people associate with owning a luxury item. As someone who has worked both with extremely wealthy individuals and with luxury brands, I have seen firsthand how it plays a role within the sense of someone's identity and the importance and the value that owning these items can bring. So luxury brands are not promoting consumption over things like flash sales and disposability like fast fashion brands are. They are promoting consumption over the allure of status. Now, you might not assign much value to owning a luxury item. Frankly, neither do I. And I feel like I know my audience well enough. I'm assuming a lot of you guys don't either. For many people, especially people who don't hold this interest in sustainability and ethics like I do, and like I'm assuming you do, owning a luxury item is aspirational. It's something that people will go into debt for. It is something that people will resort to buying dupes or knockoffs. And that is the power of luxury branding. While luxury brands don't turn out hundreds of thousands of styles every year like fast fashion brands do, they have adapted to meet consumers' expectations, which have been shaped by the fast fashion industry. In the past, luxury brands were releasing 2 to 4 collections a year, give or take, and now they are releasing double that, sometimes even more, which just perpetuates the fact that the whole demand more, buy more mentality is spanning across different spending levels and different brands, of course, and just the expectations that consumers have goes throughout every single tier. So now that we know what we know, now that we've gone through this entire video, can we say that sustainable fashion is a myth? I would say yes. While there are outliers, of course, I do think that luxury brands have set a very interesting tone for the fashion industry. And until power players have a moral reckoning, I'm not sure how much change we will actually see. That being said, I do believe that us as consumers do hold a level of power that we should be aware of. Whether you are shopping fast fashion brands, whether you are shopping luxury brands, the best thing that you can do is buy less, buy used, and buy intentionally. By doing so, you are reducing demand, and the hope, at least for me, is that if we can collectively come together and if enough of us make these changes within our buying habits, that will eventually affect these corporations' bottom line and they will be forced to change. All right, you guys, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching as always. I appreciate your support so much. I love doing these types of videos. If you want to see me dive into any other fashion industry topic, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll see what I can do. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.